Bonjour and bienvenue. Je m'appelle Ryan McKern, and thank you for joining me in another episode of the Wicked Webs We Weave podcast. Tonight we go to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to discover the ghostly tales of the docked ship with a military past. Ghosts of World War II, sailors may still man their post on this historic U.S. Navy destroyer. Paranormal activity on the USS Kidd includes shadowy figures have been seen around the ship. Phantom footsteps have been heard. Disembodied voices are heard in certain rooms. Apparitions of World War II sailors have been spotted. Apparitions of disembodied limbs have been seen wandering around. I am your host, Ryan McKern, and join me on this episode tonight, mon ami. And thank you again for joining me in the Wicked Webs We Weave. Along the shores of the Mississippi River in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, there's always something interesting to see. Whether it is a bustle of industrial barges floating through the water, or the buzz on the riverboat casinos hugging the shore. Baton Rouge's stretch of the Mississippi hosts a myriad of entertainment. This includes an especially unique museum, the USS Kidd. The USS Kidd, DD-661, the only Fletcher-class destroyer, restored to her WW2 1945 configuration and open to the public for tours. The USS Kidd, DD-661, is a Fletcher-class destroyer, the 661st destroyer built by the United States Navy. In the traditional system of naming destroyers after naval heroes, she was named after Rear Admiral Isaac Campbell Kidd, Sr. Rear Admiral Isaac Campbell Kidd, Sr., who was killed aboard his flagship USS Arizona, BB-39, during the surprise attack by the Japanese on the American fleet anchored at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, built at a federal shipbuilding and dry dock company of Kearney, New Jersey. Kidd was one of 4 destroyers: USS Bullard, DD-660, USS Thorn, DD-647, and US Turner, DD-648. Launched on February 28, 1943, in a record-breaking 14 minutes, Miss Inez Kidd, widow of Radham Kidd, served as a ship sponsor, christening her and presenting her crew with a handsome wardrobe guest book, in which she wrote, "May the destiny of the USS Kidd be glorious. May her victories be triumphant and conclusive." The Kidd's first voyage was one of some notoriety. Under the command of CDR Allen B. Roby, the destroyer moved across New York Harbor for delivery to the Brooklyn Naval Shipyards. Flying the skull and crossbones of the Jolly Roger high from the foremast. The edition of Time magazine that carried a photo of Kidd, announcing that it had been 100 years since the Jolly Roger had flown in New York Harbor. The crew quickly adopted the pirate Captain Kidd, who ironically hailed from New York, as their mascot, and hired a local cartoonist to paint the framed Buccaneer's image high the forward smokestack. Not wishing to dishonor Radham Kidd, however, the Crow obtained permission from Miss Kidd first. The Admiral's nickname at the Naval Academy had been Cap, as in Captain Kidd, and he had gone by this nickname his entire life. So on the Crow's behalf, Miss Kidd obtained official permission from the powers that be in the Navy for them to paint the pirate on the stack and fly the Jolly Roger. The Kidd would become the only vessel in the history of the United States Navy to ever have such leave granted to fly the flag of piracy. Another unique distinction about Kidd's first voyage was the makeup for the crew. Anne Rattle was the first member of the Waves woman accepted for voluntary emergency service, to be assigned to the Office of Shipbuilding in New York City. Ordered to take training tour of the Kearney shipyards, her name was placed on the list of personnel that were to schedule a report on board Kidd for the purpose of accompanying the destroyer across the harbor to the Brooklyn Naval Shipyards. Her name was listed as Innes A. Randall, omitting any mention of her gender. At that time, there was still an uneasy tradition that having a woman aboard a naval ship was to invite bad luck. However, when Kidd arrived at the Brooklyn yards, the official message sent back to the yards in Kearney read, "The Wave delivered. The Kidd at 2:30 today." A preserved World War II destroyer, USS Kidd, has since been spent decades as a popular tourist attraction. The old hull greets thousands of tourists each year and offers a one-of-a-kind glimpse into World War II naval life. But some visitors say the historic ship hasn't lost sight of the past. From strange sounds to apparitions of sailors, the USS Kidd may be one of the most haunted relics of World War II. A haunted timeline starts as such. Fred Merchant, 1943. Through the early 1940s, the United States was in a mad dash to build ships to support their Navy. On February 28, 1943, shipyards in New Jersey launched 4 new destroyers for the first time, one being the newly minted USS Kidd. They're named for a former rear admiral. The sailors on board took to commemorating fabled pirate Captain Kidd with the new vessel. So, on its first journey from the New York harbor, USS Kidd flew with Jolly Roger. In 1944, during its first missions in the Atlantic, the USS Kidd learned playfully into its pirate association and leaned heavily into. The crew continued to fly a Jolly Roger for the mast, and as the ship would rescue downed airmen from other ships, they would ransom the rescued sailors back to their home ships for trades of ice cream and other onboard rarities. As USS Kidd transitioned from the Atlantic duties to the Pacific theatre from 1943 to 1944, it earned the long-lasting nickname the Pirate of the Pacific. By 1945, the USS Kidd had seen a lot of action in the Pacific as the U.S. slowly won its war with Japan. While it had seen many lethal attacks on other ships, it had made it through relatively unscathed. But on April 11th, that changed when a kamikaze plane sailed into the Kidd's hull, destroying the forward boiler room. As told, USS Kidd lost 38 sailors in the attack, but stayed afloat. The next day, as the Kidd limped away and buried the dead at sea, the demoralizing news of President Roosevelt's death also cast a pall over the ship. Though USS Kidd spent the rest of the World War II being repaired, the ship would see action again in Korea from 1951 to 1953. USS Kidd engaged in numerous exercises and naval formations, though the ship never encountered direct attacks like it did in April of 1945. It engaged closely in the war until March of 1953, when it headed home for an overhaul. During its docking in San Diego that year, a freighter crashed into the side of the USS Kidd, causing great damage, but no injuries to the crew. After both World War II and Korea, USS Kidd went on to do a wide variety of peacetime duties and Cold War deployments. In 1957, USS Kidd was a filming location for the movie Run Silent, Run Deep. By the 1960s, the ship had seen its share of age and was transitioned to a training day ship for Navy reservists. In 1964, the ship officially decommissioned, but when USS Kidd was finally stricken from naval registers in 1975, it wouldn't end up in the scrapyard like other Navy ships. After being deemed unfit for continued naval use, USS Kidd was picked alongside with two other destroyers in its class, USS Cassin Young and USS The Sullivans, to be preserved as museums. The ship was transferred to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where it opened to tourists in the USS Kidd's Veterans Museum in 1983. Some of the tourists now claim the old warship hasn't left war behind. Instead, some suggest the ship is forever haunted by the souls lost on board during World War II. Though it had a long, prosperous wartime life, the paranormal activity around the USS Kidd all seems to center on the events of April 11, 1945. The kamikaze attack on the ship that struck that day would remain its worst loss of life. Throughout its operational history, and now witnesses claim the trauma caused by that attack and the 38 lives lost remains alive through the ghosts still lingering in USS Kidd's corridors. Shifting shadows and strange apparitions are some of the most common reports of ghostly happenings aboard. Some people report to find ghostly happenings aboard. Some people report to find shadow figures lurking up and down halls and in rooms, and others have claimed to see for more detailed apparitions. In these instances, witnesses have reported seeing the ghostly figures clad in 1940s Navy uniform. Though none of these spectral sailors have been positively identified yet, many believe that they are sailors killed in the 1945 attack. Perhaps the most unique report of the hauntings aboard the USS Kidd also has to do with the apparitions, or rather pieces of them. While full shadow figures and apparitions are often seen around the ship, other appearances show only body parts floating around the air. Witnesses claim that the disembodied arms and legs will wander the halls of the ship, as if connected to invisible bodies. Unlike the full-bodied figures and apparitions, these shadowy appendages are known to pass straight through the ship's walls. Along with unexplainable shadows, odd sounds and disembodied voices are also a fixture of the USS Kidd. The audible voices are said to be especially prevalent around the old sleeping quarters aboard. Along with the echoes of ghostly voices, other unexplained sounds have been heard on the ship. These include the sounds of heavy doors slamming and the patter of footsteps coming from empty rooms and hallways. The USS Kidd, as a Fletcher-class destroyer, is not alone in its paranormal claims. Out of the 3 preserved destroyers in its class, another is also purportedly haunted. USS The Sullivans, moored in Buffalo, New York, is also a purportedly haunted museum ship. And just like the USS Kidd, with its phantom floating limbs, the civilian sports some truly unique ghostly claims. Mainly that it is haunted by its namesake Sullivan brothers, despite none of them setting foot aboard. All the ghost stories swirling around the USS Kidd's hull have seemed to deter any visitors over the years. On the contrary, it seems the ghostly stories have become part of what attracts visitors to the historic ship. The ship remains so popular that it will remain at least partially open during the ongoing overhaul through 2025. During that time, the ship will be moved from Baton Rouge, Louisiana to nearby Houma, Louisiana, where it will remain open during refurbishments. While the ship will return to its place in Baton Rouge in 2025 later on, and possibly 2026, one has to wonder what the ghosts will think of the updates. And while you can't book a formal paranormal investigation on the USS Kidd, they offer overnight camping packages that let you explore the old ship after dark. Who knows what you might see or what you might hear reverberating through the metal-clad hull. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to spot one of the ship's infamous apparitions, or at least an arm or leg of one. Special thanks to Mitch Goff, HauntedUS.com, and USSKidd.com. USSKIDD.com. For information and research in making this episode this evening. And thank you again to each and every one of you for listening to us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and many more. Once again, I'm your host, Ryan McKern. Thank you again for joining me in the proverbial darkness, my friends. And until this ship docks near us, au revoir.